Here's a truth that shows up in every business sooner or later. Most problems aren't problems, they're missing structure. The moment's work relies on memory, inbox threads, and people just knowing what to do. The cracks start. Things get repeated, data drifts, customers get stuck, teams get tired, and the weird part is, everyone can feel the friction, but it's hard to point at the exact place it's coming from. That's the space I live in. I'm Luke Anthony Houghton, founder of ProjektID, and I build digital systems that turn messy requirements into reliable workflows. The mindset is simple. Experience is an extension of understanding, and understanding is only useful when it becomes something repeatable. ProjektID sits at the intersection of UX clarity, data discipline, engineering constraints, and practical automation across Squarespace, Knack, Node.js/Express via Replit, Make.com, and Google Cloud Storage. What you're about to hear is a guided version of the document, not a readout, but the same through line. Stability over novelty, clear states over guesswork, and outcomes you can actually trace. On this first page, the message is straightforward. ProjektID builds systems that survive reality. That means taking complicated business needs, the messy kind that come with exceptions, edge cases, partial information, and changing requirements, and turning them into workflows that are measurable, maintainable, and safe to operate. Not just something that looks good in a demo, but something that still behaves a month after launch when the content has changed, a new team member is involved, and the platform updates in the background. The guiding preference is stability over novelty, fewer moving parts, clearer rules, safer execution, traceable outcomes. And what is this document, really? It's a structured introduction to how ProjektID works, what the technical capabilities look like in practice, and why the in-house solutions exist: CX+, Core, Bag, and Blog Pro Sub. It's intentionally not sales framing. It's meant to show the engineering discipline behind the work. The core domains are consistent: Squarespace client-side enhancements, Knack data design and operations, Node/Express processing on Replit, Make.com automation pipelines, and versioned storage via Google Cloud Storage. The goal stays the same: reduce friction, standardize outputs, and make work observable. If someone only had time for one page, I'd want them to leave with one idea. I translate intent into systems. That translation has a pattern. First, clarify inputs, then define the rules, then shape predictable outputs, then decide what success actually means, not in vibes, in measurable terms. Most of the work happens where ambiguity meets operational pressure: inconsistent processes, fragmented data, platform constraints, and repeated manual tasks that quietly drain time every week. That's where systems either fail loudly or fail silently and drift. So the strengths are practical: reliability first enhancements on Squarespace with scoped editor-aware patterns. Knack systems designed around stable identifiers, validation, dedupe logic, and audit trails. Node.js plus Express services on Replit for controlled processing, validation, and safe API behaviors. Make.com automation built with idempotency, retries, backoff, error routes, and reconciliation reporting. Output contracts treated like real contracts. Schema-locked JSON, mapped fields, and predictable formatting. And the working standard underneath all of that is observability. Systems should never just do something. They should show states, progress, and clear outcomes, so teams can trust what's happening and debug it when needed. ProjektID is a digital systems studio founded in 2019, built around the belief that understanding should become usable structure. The studio exists to bridge gaps that regularly cause pain in real operations, turning business goals into technical constraints, turning content into discoverability, and turning repeated effort into controlled automation. My own path is part of why the studio works the way it does. I studied applied science and forensics, then biochemistry, which trained a certain discipline, evidence-led thinking, validation, and respect for constraints. That way of thinking translates cleanly into systems engineering: define variables, test assumptions, measure outputs. And yes, ProjektID is built by me, Luke Anthony Houghton, originally Romford, Essex, now based in Alicante province, Spain. Outside the build world: golf, proper coffee, heavy training, spicy food, and the occasional new wine that earns a repeat. This page sets up what's next: how the studio thinks, how delivery is governed, and why the current solutions exist. Because when problems repeat, the correct response isn't endless patching. It's building something repeatable. This page is about mindset. Fundamentals first, modern tooling second. Tools are useful, but they're not the solution. Systems work is applied engineering. Requirements become contracts, workflows become pipelines, and outputs become governed artifacts. Automation is treated as accountable, not magical. Humans stay in the loop where judgments, approvals, or risk boundaries matter. And features aren't piled on just because they're possible. Feature accumulation without guardrails is how support load grows quietly. So, ProjektID prioritizes fewer, stronger behaviors: predictable, maintainable, stable across devices, stable across environments. Guardrails matter, fail-safes matter. That means early exits, strict gating, controlled rendering, and readable failure handling. Errors should be observable and recoverable, not silent drift. And consistency is treated as a scaling tool: naming conventions, versioning, deterministic configuration, documentation. These are part of delivery, not the later task. Finally, measurement. Success is tied to things that matter: cycle time reduction, fewer duplicates, lower support volume, improved retrieval accuracy, fewer regressions. If measurement is hard, define proxies so improvement is still trackable. Instead of listing services, this page describes capability through outcomes, because outcomes are what teams feel. ProjektID repeatedly delivers 4 shifts. 1. Reduced operational friction. Most friction comes from ambiguity and inconsistent handoffs. The work is to map happy paths and exception paths, clarify responsibilities, and remove repeated decisions. Automation only arrives after the process is stable, otherwise you just speed up inconsistency. 2. Standardized outputs. Standardization protects trust, canonical identifiers, fixed schemas, validated mappings, predictable formatting. That makes results reusable, searchable, and safe to store in systems like Knack. 3. Observable workflows. Progress stages, counters, logs, timestamps, reconciliation markers, not as nice to have, but because visibility prevents long-term drift. 4. Improved discovery and clarity. Often the content exists. People just can't find it. Structured inventories, governed retrieval, clear UI patterns, and controlled outputs reduce repeated explanations and dead ends. Best fit environments tend to be product-minded teams, ops-heavy organizations, and agencies that value engineering discipline and maintainability. This page is less about a timeline and more about a pattern. Discipline to delivery under pressure to repeatable systems. Early experiences build instincts around consistency and constraints. Reliability rarely comes from inspiration. It comes from repeatable practice and defined checks. Scientific study reinforced evidence-led thinking. Hypothesis, test, iterate, adjust. That mindset carries directly into engineering and workflow design. Then years of self-directed learning across UI/UX, branding, front-end development, and systems thinking sharpened a practical accountability, deadlines, stakeholder expectations, maintenance reality. ProjektID formed in 2019 to unify those domains into one approach. And then the shift into systems work became inevitable. Client work kept showing the same repeats: discovery friction, data inconsistency, repeated UI upgrades. Those repeats were the signal to build in-house systems. CX Plus to codify website improvements. Core to govern retrieval and output. Bag to structure content pipelines. Blog Pro Sub to maintain systems over time. ProjektID operates across the full chain. Clarify requirements, translate them into constraints, implement across client and server layers, then maintain with documentation and versioning. That breadth exists to prevent the common failure mode: systems that work once and degrade later. Delivery is reliability first. Changes include guardrails. Configurations are deterministic. Systems are built to rerun safely. And when platforms inject dynamic content or vary by template, defensive patterns are the default. The differentiator isn't just breadth, it's connecting domains without losing clarity. A front-end change can affect data capture. An automation can drift without auditability. A retrieval system can fail without content structure. So evidence trails matter: timestamps, run markers, reconciliation outputs, documentation. The CV may give the timeline details, but the operating standard is what actually protects outcomes. This page breaks delivery into layers because that's how systems stay understandable. Client side, Squarespace. JavaScript/HTML/CSS with strict scoping, explicit page type detection, idempotent DOM work, and editor-aware behavior. Reruns shouldn't duplicate wrappers or handlers. Server-side, Node/Express via Replit. Controlled processing with validation endpoints, payload normalization, predictable response contracts, and resilience via retrees/backoff. The point is stable interfaces. Data layer, Knack, schema-first design, stable identifiers, validation rules, dedupe strategies, and audit timestamps. Bulk operations follow a safe pipeline: ingest to validate, to reconcile, to write back, to stamp. Automation layer, make.com. Idempotent scenarios with error routes, throttling, requeues, and reconciliation reporting. No automation chaos. Storage, Google Cloud Storage. Versioned JSON and assets for traceability and stable downstream consumption. ProjektID starts with clarity: entity map, canonical identifiers, ownership rules, success metrics. That's the blueprint layer, because automation without that just accelerates inconsistency. Then comes a thin slice pilot: ship one workflow end to end to prove lift. Reduced cycle time, fewer errors, fewer duplicates, improved retrieval. Once that's proven, scaling becomes safer because the system already has a tested shape. Human in the loop matters when judgment or risk exists. Draft states, review checkpoints, and immutable logs protect trust. Resilience design is also built in. Event-driven where feasible, scheduled fallbacks where necessary, retrees/backoff for temporary failures. Silent failures are treated as unacceptable. Systems should explain what's happened and what to do next. Governance rounds it off. RBAC, versioning, audit trails. This reduces risk and makes change easier to control. This page is about how systems avoid breaking. Defensive execution means guard clauses, early exits, null checks, readiness gates, because DOM structures change, data goes missing, and platforms inject unexpected states. Strict gating checks context before acting, correct domain, authorized state, entitlement signals, expected page type. If the conditions aren't met, the system stops cleanly. That protects environments from accidental behavior. Configuration is deterministic. Data attributes, registries, feature flags, predictable defaults. It reduces hidden coupling and makes debugging easier. Idempotence is default. Reruns should be safe. Markers prevent duplicate injections, duplicated event handlers, repeated wrappers, especially important in SPA navigation and editors. Observability is treated as standard. Progress stages, counters, timestamps, logs, and reconciliation reports where appropriate. And safe rendering matters. Sanitization, allowed tag sets, controlled output shaping, especially when content is generated or retrieved dynamically. The reason these systems exist is simple. Repetition is a signal. When the same issues show up across projects. Discovery friction, repeated UI upgrades, inconsistent outputs, workflow drift. The correct response isn't endless custom patches. It's governed, repeatable systems. CX Plus proves modular, scoped client-side execution with idempotent behavior and editor safety. Core proves governed retrieval, entitlement-aware pipelines, response shaping, and safe rendering. BAG proves structured content pipelines with schema-locked outputs, validation gates, and safe regeneration paths. Blog Pro Sub proves operational continuity, monitoring, documentation, versioning, and disciplined iteration. What they all prove is the same foundation: reliability, first engineering, where output quality, observability, and maintainability are non-negotiable. CX Plus is a modular plugin ecosystem that enhances Squarespace 7.1 through repeatable, documented behaviors, without forcing rebuilds or theme migrations. It demonstrates disciplined client-side engineering under real platform constraints: template variability, dynamic injection, SPA navigation, editor contexts. Execution is scoped by page type and condition so behavior stays targeted. Core patterns include scoped selectors, idempotent changes with enactment markers, guard clauses, editor-safe logic, conflict avoidance, and careful observer discipline. Configuration is deterministic. Data attributes, feature flags, predictable defaults, standard naming conventions, so modules can be enabled, disabled, or updated without unintended side effects. Why it matters is operational. Improvements become consistent modules, regression risk drops, and the same patterns can be reused across many sites while preserving stability and editor compatibility. Core is a content processing and retrieval engine designed to produce controlled, accurate, useful outputs from authorized content. The goal isn't smart for the sake of it. It's predictability, consistent responses, governed formatting, clear boundaries. On the client side, Core demonstrates lifecycle control, presence checks, entitlement gating, clean exits. UI state is explicit, processing states, progress queues, input constraints, so it avoids double submits and confusion. On the server side, the pipeline is controlled. Entitlement validation to content retrieval, to response shaping, to sanitized output. Payloads are predictable, and limits vary by context. Core uses a blended retrieval approach, lexical relevance plus semantic style matching, so it handles phrasing differences while staying anchored to authorized content. Trust comes from progress updates, resilience patterns, and safe rendering. Operationally, It reduces repeated explanations and improves access to information without drama. BAG is a structured writing system that turns idea to organized draft under constraints. Its job is to remove blank page friction and enforce a framework, sections with clear roles, consistent tone controls, predictable formatting that's easy to edit and publish. It demonstrates record-driven orchestration in Knack, parent/child models, stable ordering, run state controls, timestamps, mapped outputs that stay traceable. It supports bulk workflows. Inputs are parsed, validated, normalized, deduped. Reference URLs are validated and stored in fixed slots to prevent drift. Generation is governed. Outputs are schema-locked, validated before storage, and kept within defined boundaries. Regeneration is safe and granular. Rerun a section without rebuilding the whole data set. Quota tracking adds accountability because pipelines only scale when usage, limits, and outcomes remain measurable. Blog Pro Sub represents operational continuity, the long-term discipline of maintaining and improving a digital system over time. It's not reactive support, it's iterative stewardship. Monitor, refine, document, roll out improvements safely. Systems drift, performance degrades, UX clarity weakens, content patterns become inconsistent, small regressions accumulate. Blog Pro Sub addresses that reality with baseline checks and periodic reviews. Change management is structured, versioned updates, documented changes, rollout steps with rollback awareness. Identify a measurable issue, define the constraints, implement a contained improvement, validate across contexts, then record what changed and why. Cadence matters. Review to backlog, to implement, to validate, to record. This prevents chaos and avoids random changes that introduce regressions. What it proves is mature systems thinking, treating the environment as living with maintainability and trust as the long game. This page is about building data systems that stay clean. Schema-first design, consistent naming, validation rules, stable identifiers, controlled state fields to prevent unclear ownership and fragile reporting. Deduplication is designed, not hoped for. Canonical forms are used for comparisons. Normalized names, URLs, identifiers, and duplicate detection happens during ingestion and bulk operations. Bulk safety follows a pipeline. Ingest to validate, to reconcile to write back, to stamp. Each stage is designed to be safe to rerun where possible. Audit timestamps and run markers, keep changes traceable and reversible when needed. Relationships reflect real entities and lifecycle stages. Field mapping is explicit and documented. Ordering and status fields keep outputs predictable, especially with modular child records. Auditability is baseline. Provenance fields, run states, timestamps. The capability here isn't building a database. It's designing a system that supports reliable operations and controlled automation long-term. Squarespace environments vary by template, page type, and editor context. Dynamic injection and SPA navigation can break naive scripts fast. ProjektID treats those constraints as core requirements. Client-side behavior is scoped to correct containers and page contexts. Selectors are template-aware. When content appears multiple times, unique markers prevent collisions and repeated enactment. Progressive enhancement is key. Features layer onto existing structure. If the element isn't present or the environment is incompatible, the code exits cleanly. No layout breakage. Safe DOM mutation means idempotence. No duplicated wrappers, no duplicate event handlers, predictable state markers even when content re-renders. Observer discipline matters. Minimal scope, explicit triggers, loop prevention. Performance is protected by avoiding constant polling and heavy reflows. Editor-safe behavior is mandatory. The builder should never be fought or broken. Server-side logic is built as controlled interfaces, endpoints that validate inputs, enforce constraints, and return predictable payloads. Pipelines often include validation, scraping/proxy routes when needed, content cleaning, size limits, normalization, structured output formatting. Determinism matters. The same input should yield consistent outcomes. Access governance is enforced with entitlement checks and rules. Client-side signals shouldn't bypass constraints. Server-side gating reduces tamper risk and supports stable operations. Resilience patterns include retries/backoff, predictable error responses, caching, versioned outputs, and logging for operational monitoring. Replit deployment supports practical iteration and controlled release. The mindset remains the same: fail safely. Partial failure shouldn't corrupt data, break UI, or leave users without feedback. Automation is a force multiplier, good or bad. Before automating, workflows are mapped with happy paths and exception paths. Automating ambiguity just accelerates inconsistency. Idempotency is default. Already processed checks, idempotency keys, reconciliation markers, so reruns don't double write or create duplicates. Failures are expected and designed for error routes, retries with backoff, requeues, and human review checkpoints when appropriate. The goal is controlled recovery, not silent abandonment. Rate limits and timing are handled intentionally. Concurrency, batching, delays, throttling, scheduled fallbacks. Reconciliation reporting makes success measurable, highlighting mismatches, missing updates, incomplete runs. The capability here isn't connecting apps. It's building automation that remains stable and accountable over time. This page shows the pattern in real scenarios. Case 1. Discovery friction. Content existed, but people couldn't find it. Repeated questions, dead ends. The fix wasn't more content. It was structured inventories, governed retrieval, predictable response shaping, progress queues, safe rendering. The outcome? Fewer repeats, clearer pathways, improved trust. Case 2. Manual entry drift. Repeated data entry caused inconsistency, duplicates, unreliable reporting. The approach was validation rules, canonical identifiers, dedupe logic, and a controlled pipeline. Ingest to validate, to reconcile to write back with audit stamps. The outcome? Cleaner datasets, safer bulk operations, clearer operations. Case 3. Repeated UI fixes. The same UX improvements rebuilt across sites, creating maintenance debt. The approach? Modular, scoped, idempotent plugins with configuration standards and clash avoidance. The outcome? Faster rollouts, fewer regressions, reduced custom tax. The point is simple. Repetition signals missing systems. Contracts, governance, and observability turn one-off fixes into dependable operations. ProjektID converts vague goals into explicit constraints. Inputs, outputs, edge cases, success measures, failure modes. Ambiguity is treated as risk, so definitions are clarified early and written down. Done is defined in measurable terms. Reduced cycle time, fewer duplicates, lower support volume, improved retrieval accuracy, fewer regressions, performance improvements. Where measurement is hard, proxies and acceptance checks are agreed. Documentation is part of delivery. Configuration standards, environment notes, versioning details, Operational guidance, reducing dependency risk. Communication style is direct and evidence-led. Trade-offs are surfaced early. What improves reliability? What adds complexity? What might break under platform constraints? What should be deferred? Collaboration runs on short feedback loops. Blueprint first, thin slice delivery, validate in real environments, then scale. Stakeholders get visible checkpoints and progress states so adoption is smoother. This page is built for scanning, proof by layer, not vague claims. Web engineering evidence, scoped DOM targeting, idempotent enactments, editor-safe behavior, performance-friendly observer discipline across dynamic Squarespace contexts. Data systems evidence, schema-first design in Knack, stable identifiers, validation, canonical forms, dedupe strategies, relationship modeling, audit timestamps. Bulk operations with reconciliation markers. Server-side evidence, Node/Express endpoints for validation, controlled processing, scraping/proxy, sanitization, size limits, caching/versioned outputs, predictable payload contracts, retries/backoff for resilience. Automation evidence. Make .com idempotency checks, error routes, requeues, batching, rate limit handling, reconciliation reporting, automation applied after mapping exceptions. AI pipeline evidence. Schema locked generation, validation gates, controlled formatting, safe rendering rules, outputs constrained to remain storable and auditable. Documentation and governance evidence, naming standards, versioning mentality, rollout notes, audit trails, maintainability protected over time. ProjektID fits best where clarity and reliability are valued. Product-minded teams, ops-heavy organizations needing workflow structure, and agencies that want maintainable engineering discipline. Value shows up when repetition drops. Fewer handoffs, fewer duplicated explanations, fewer data inconsistencies, fewer regressions after change. Systems become easier to run when states are visible and contracts are explicit. What's valued here is clarity, accountability, iteration, outcomes. Quality as operational, not cosmetic. Sustainable progress over fast but fragile execution. Problems are framed as systems. Define entity map, lock identifiers, validate inputs, design safe outputs, measure success. Tooling stays flexible. Squarespace, Knack, Node/Express, Make.com, cloud storage. But the standards stay consistent. Opportunity types include systems engineering inside digital platforms, workflow and data pipeline design, operational tooling that reduces manual effort, and product style development where recurring problems become repeatable modules. So the through line end to end is this. ProjektID exists to reduce friction, remove repeated effort, and build systems that remain reliable after launch. The tools and solutions are byproducts of that mindset. Repeat problems converted into governed workflows with predictable outputs. This isn't a pitch. It's a demonstrated approach. Strict gating, explicit configuration, safe failure paths, observability, auditability, and controlled rendering. The goal is trust. Trust in what the system outputs, trust in how it behaves, trust that it won't quietly drift. What to expect from delivery is predictable behavior and traceable change. Systems are built to degrade gracefully when inputs are missing or environments shift. Outputs are constrained so they remain usable and safe to store, and the work is documented so teams aren't forced into hidden dependency. Thanks for listening. If you want to explore further, ProjektID lives at projected.co, and the easiest way to understand the ecosystem is to look at it as a set of repeatable operating standards. Systems first, evidence-led, and built to hold up in the real world.